Helps if I unmute myself. So, hey, good morning, everybody. Um, I'm jumping on a half hour earlier than normal just because I've got a very busy day planned ahead, and this was the only way I could squeeze this in. And it's just been a very busy week, just so you know. And I am probably not prepared as I'd like to be to kind of discuss this stuff. So, and what I mean by that is we're going to be reviewing Leighton and James White's debate and going into just some things that we're going to play some of the clips, we're going to listen to it and then just respond and kind of go from there. So um yeah, thanks that I'm muted. Just seeing the comments now. Anyways, hope you're doing well, and I'm going to limit this to just 1 hour. So if you're watching, I'm going to stick to 1 hour, so I'll end at 9 a.m. Eastern time. But let me get my screen pulled up here so I can get the debate ready. So, and I'll mention this too. Let me do this really quick. Sorry. I'm working on a lot of different things right now. I there's some cool stuff I'm not going to be able to say quite yet, but hopefully next week I'll have a video out that is going to explain a new project that is going to launch, and it's very exciting. So I'm also working on my response to James White and the Hebrews video, and so I might talk a little bit about that as we go on this morning. And working on a gospel project, and there's just a lot of different things. I'm preaching this Sunday at my church. Might also upload that too if I can get a copy of it and post that as well if it goes well. So if it doesn't, I may not, but Lord willing, it will. So let's start here. So I think with this debate has been very contentious. It seems to be on the internet, more in particular, probably YouTube, but then also Twitter. A lot of back and forth. A lot of people making comments. A lot of people creating polls. Who did better, and obviously, true to form, those that have a YouTube audience or just an audience that is more reformed, they lean towards James White, and those that lean non-reformed lean towards uh, lean towards Leighton. So it's interesting, just the bias there that way. Now, I'm not I'm not skilled in debating. So like some of the things I'm like with debating and stuff, I'm learning this too, even having just done one. I'm still learning, what the format and way to do this is. So one of the things that play also a response that James was making to John 6:44 and 45 regarding someone that Leighton had on his channel as well. I think yesterday or the day before. Um, his name is Joel. I forget his last name, but he's a biblical scholar and linguistic uh, through Oxford. So we might play a little bit of that as well, just to hear James White's response. And then also interesting is that I found that what eh, several guys that know Greek language and stuff better than I do, different than White, um, are kind of affirming some of the same things that I was picking up in my John 6 video that I put out there. And we might talk about that as well. So, but let's play this. This is Leighton's rebuttal time. And I think this is where a lot of people spend time on the openings. And, I thought each person did their own respective way of their openings. So I want to get into some of the things, being that this is only going to be an hour, some of the shorter clips. So I want to go into one rebuttal and then also one cross examination. So let's dive in.
I know I do talk fast. I get in trouble for that sometimes. I'll try to slow down just a little bit, but my opponent still hasn't, he has the burden of proof here tonight. He's the affirmative, and he still hasn't made a case for unconditional election. And he keeps the only main argument that he made is that listening and learning are passive realities. Since when?
Okay, sorry, that's too fast.
We all intuitively know that teachers are responsible to teach, students are responsible to learn. And that aligns exactly with what the scripture teaches. God did not fail to do his part in teaching. Israel, generally speaking, failed to learn, which is why they're held responsible for that. Jeremiah 32:33 says, they have turned to me their back and not their face. And though I have taught them again and again, persistently, they have not listened to receive instruction. Does that sound like listening and learning are just passive realities? Do you blame your teachers at your school when your kids put in their earbuds and play on their phone? Or do you blame the student? Do you just assume the teacher doesn't really want to teach them when they refuse to learn? Because that's what Calvinism is asking you to believe. God really doesn't want them to learn. He didn't pick them. He doesn't love them. That's what he's saying. I know he says it's all emotional. I can't help it that Calvinism makes emotional things. That doesn't make it wrong just because it's emotional. Just because God rejected them before they were ever born, and that's emotional for you. And some of the...
Just to say, I think it's hilarious that you can see James White's responses in his facial expressions, like, because he's like right there at the bottom of the screen. I think it's kind of unfortunate for him that way, but it does make it, I think, even a little bit more entertaining that way. But really quick on that point, I thought this was a good point, and I'm going to play another clip as well. Good morning, everybody. I think this is a really good point. You know, do we passively learn or do we actively learn? And those that are actively learning and have learned from the Father, as we see in Isaiah 54 and Jeremiah 31, that both of these passages that are kind of being brought out into John chapter 6. And in fact, I might go there really quick. And then let me play this. I'm going to search for the verse, and we'll keep going. If I can find my screen.
You love are rejected by God before they're ever born, and that's emotional for you. That doesn't make it any less true on Calvinism. The fact is, he's has the burden to establish that this is what God's doing. That this inconceivable concept of people being judged because of something they have absolutely no control over. The reason that we know racism is so horrible is because you don't judge somebody for the color of their skin. Why? Because they can't help it. They don't have anything to do with it. Well, what do the reprobate have control over with regard to their unbelief and their hatred towards God? They have no control over it. Now, the Calvinists will say it's because they want to reject God. They hate God by nature, by default. Yes, God decreed for them to be that way from birth. They couldn't help it. There's no basis for human culpability. They have unworthiness. They're just victims of the divine decree. There's no reason to feel, might as well feel sorry for this crowd of unbelievers because they're walking away in unbelief because secretly God didn't really pick them. Jesus doesn't really love them. And the reason they're walking away is because they weren't picked. But that flies in the face of the context. The context over and over again. He says, you refuse to come to me so that you may have life. Just like he says in Ezekiel, I don't desire the death of anyone, declares the sovereign Lord. Come to me, repent and live. Holding out his hands to them. How do you reconcile the passage over and over and over again of him longing to gather the children under his wings, but they're unwilling, repeated by Isaiah as well. Again, it's Dr. White's burden to establish that this verse teaches unconditional election, and I never have seen it even mentioned so far. Notice it also says in Isaiah 55:3 that I mentioned, incline your ear, come to me and hear that your soul may live. That seems to think that you're responsible to incline your ear and hear so as to live. Dr. White says it's just a passive reality for the ones who were picked. And if you were one of the blessed ones to get picked, then you will incline your ear to hear because he'll cause you to incline your ear to hear. So all the ones who don't incline their ear to hear, we can just say, well, they must not have been picked. Again, never established in the scripture at all. It's just presupposed. But we should expect that from a presuppositionalist because that's what presuppositional apologetics is all about. Not only do they presuppose everything when they debate atheists, they presuppose stuff when they debate theology too. What do? They presuppose Calvinism. They presuppose Stula.
So yeah, let me know what you guys think. See, One Way Home says listening and learning are not the same, but they seem to be conflated as being a repetition of the same action. To James, you have to listen and learn. You have to hear so that you can know. Okay, good. Ryan says, no one can be drawn to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up on the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they will all be drawn by God. I think he continues here. Everyone who has been drawn by God is drawn, and is drawn by the Father is drawn to me. There's a lot of one of the things that I picked up on when I did my study on John, the Gospel of John, in preparation for a response to James White on my John 6 video, was how many times Jesus is explaining in both ways. Like, if you know the Father, you will know me. And or in other passages, if you know me, you would know the Father. And it's just this like you know that I have come from the Father if you have loved the Father. But if love of the Father is not in you, then you would not accept me. And over through the Gospel of John, we see this all over the place. And it I think it proves the point. And let me share my. So Isaiah 54 verse 13 is a prophecy spoken, and it's what Jesus uses in John 6:44. It says, all your children shall be taught by God, and great shall be the peace of your children. And I don't know what verse in 55 he brought out here. Oh, yeah, here it is. Incline your ear and come to me, hear, and your soul shall live, and I will make an everlasting covenant with you, the sure mercies of David. So the Old Testament communicates over and over again. Like there, I think the Old Testament is for sure very clear that there's not this. Uh, yes, we see God's choice for Israel, but God's choice for Israel is so that they can be a blessing to the nations. I think there's so much that's read into, and I know this wasn't a big. We're going to talk about, I think, position versus debate strategy, and was it the right thing for Leighton to do? And bringing this up, I mean, theologically, I think Leighton is calling James White, it's carpet from under the rug. Like, we can't go to John 6. This is the same thing that I was accused for, and the same thing that I had to wrestle with when it came to my debate as well. But if you look in my debate, in my cross examination time, I had to bring out, like, we're starting from different foundations. And when you go to a passage like John 6, James is trying to make the case that you have to read what it says, and then get your understanding from there. But that's not what he's doing. He's actually presupposing Calvinism is true, because he does is he reads it, and then he applies his interpretation onto it. And what some biblical scholars that have come out since, and this is reformed and non-reformed, that I've found, have said, no, just because, I mean, no one's arguing the words that are there. Okay. No one's arguing that. So just because the words are there doesn't mean that James White has a proper interpretation. It doesn't mean that Leighton Flowers has a proper interpretation. It doesn't mean that anyone has a proper interpretation if they just read the words, and then if they just read the words. They have to interpret, what do these words mean? And that's what I've noticed with all of these. Um, I think this has been really good, because I feel like all of these Bible scholars and people that know the Greek and are um, able to kind of meet James where, toe to toe, but they're just non-Calvinistic, and some are. I'll explain that in a second. Are coming out saying John 6:44 does not support James White's argument here. And even what's interesting is it's okay. Like, D.A. Carson, the guy that James White responded to, and I'll probably hop over and play this video in a minute. The guy that James White responded to which is a guy from Oxford in biblical studies, uh, didn't really play much of his response to it. He kind of stopped him, and so he didn't really listen to what he had to say. But he got to a point where he just wanted to make his arguments, and so he ends up saying that D.A. Carson, if you get D.A. Carson, and which I think he said was I have D.A. Carson's commentary on the Gospel of John, not read through the whole thing, but and I'm gonna go look into it now just to see it. But I think he said it was written in the early 90s, and then when he brought it out, he does not affirm John 6:44 teaches effectual grace, effectual salvation coming from a Calvinistic perspective in John 6:44. So I'm excited to actually go read that. And D.A. Carson is a guy that I do respect greatly, and what it proves, this is in favor of someone like James White or anyone else that is reformed, that it's okay that John 6:44 doesn't support Calvinism, because at the end of the day, what do we want to do? We want to be biblical. We want to know what the truth says. That's it, okay? We just want to submit to what the text says. And you've got not only non-reformed, non-Calvinistic people saying it doesn't mean that. And it's not like, hey, you just have a different interpretation. No, there's reformed people too. Very scholarly reformed people. I would say that D.A. Carson is a very scholarly guy. Um, I'm sure I could learn a ton from D.A. Carson, and he does not affirm that John 6:44 teaches what James White professes that it teaches. So and you know what? Obviously, he's still a Calvinist to my best understanding. I've not heard D.A. Carson in a while. I think he's kind of slowed down and backed away from being in the limelight, if you will. But so I don't know. Maybe he has changed his position, but I mean that was back in the early '90s. I've heard him since then. I definitely know that he still advocated Calvinism after the fact. So let me get back to it.
S before tulip, the sovereignty, meaning right, determinism, they presuppose that when they walk into the text. And so they believe God decreed for everyone born unable to believe truth revealed by God unless you were picked before you were born and irresistibly caused to believe. He starts with those presuppositions. And if those presuppositions are false, then don't you all agree that would lead to a bad interpretation? Of course it would. And I have every right to challenge his presuppositions. This happened in the Romans 9 debate too. I challenge his presuppositions, and what he doesn't exegete the text. He just jumps all over the place. He just nobody can follow what he's saying. What's really happening? He's not engaging with the point of discussion. The question of the debate is not who can read through the Bible and tell people what you think it means. The question of the debate is which of these two chapters establishes Calvinism. And Dr. White is not engaging that debate. Listen, I have presuppositions too. We both have traditions. Dr. White's known for saying, hey, your tradition will guide your exegesis. It'll guide where you go. I agree with that. But he has to recognize he has a tradition too. It started with Augustine. And that tradition is an Augustinian tradition of tulip. And he reads that tradition he whitewashes John chapter 6 is what he does. And he brings his Calvinism into John 6. So when it says no one can, he reads the T of tulip. He sees. And
now I know Leighton got kind of a lot of flack from White, and obviously those that support White and hold to his position, because it does and I agree. I agree with him that this feels like you're not sticking with the text. You're actually going beyond the text into the presuppositions, which is Calvinism, and that's why you read into this is what's, I think, the framing of what the debate is needed to be expanded, I think, a little bit further to say something like why John 6:44 supports or does not support Calvinism, or something like that. I think would have been better, because the way that it's framed, James gets on Leighton quite a bit for saying like you're not sticking to the text. And you could, in some regard, maybe look at my debate with him and he could say the same thing, and he was kind of saying the same thing in the sense like I'm sticking to the text and you're going all over the place. Well, the framing of the debate matters. The framing of my debate to a particular text, it was very broad, very general, and you could go anywhere you want to go with it. In Leighton's case, the framing was on a particular text, but in order for Leighton to basically, because he has to back beyond what the text is, because I think he's right. There is presuppositions that we're bringing onto the text. We interpret the text. No one's disagreeing what the text says in the words, but we disagree in the interpretation of the text. And so you have to back up, where does that interpretation come from? And Leighton makes the case that it's coming from Augustine and Augustinianism, then to Calvin and to the Reformers, and what is commonly known now today as Calvinism. And so he is holding to that, and that's why. Look at the chat again here. Oh, Manny's here. Manny, I'm going to say something. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I intend at some point, I think, to probably engage in another debate. Uh, Even though, like, having the experience, obviously, I said yes to debating James White because I figured I've never done it before, I've never had the experience, but if I would have said no, I would have always wondered this side of heaven, what would that have been like if I would have said yes? So that's one of the main reasons why I said yes, because I really wanted to know what that was going to look like, and it was a great period of time to be disciplined in the Word over something, and even more concretely know what the text says. From what I was gathering, learned a lot through my preparations in that. But I might engage in what would be called a debate, but maybe more so a conversation. And I've thought, Manny, let me know if you're interested, of making you the moderator. Okay. Again, just let me know. And I want to get you involved, because I know you comment a lot on my channel. You comment a lot on other people's channels that don't adhere to what you believe. But, I believe that, we're both made in the image of God, and the biggest thing that both of us can agree on is truth. Like, what is the truth? And we want to submit to the truth, right? I think we can both agree on that. And uh, I want to show you some love. Okay. So that's it. Hopefully that is reciprocal. All right, let's go back. This rebuttal time is almost over.
Given by the Father, he reads the unconditional, the you of the tulip. And then he sees, unless they're drawn, and he makes the word draw into a irresistible force, and now he has the I of tulip, all established right there in a neat little package. You may say, well, Leighton, don't you have presuppositions? Yes, but I don't have to get my presuppositions from Augustine. I don't have to get even Paul, or a Calvinistic reading of Paul. I can get them from the book of John, because you know what my three presuppositions are? John 3:16. God loved the world and everyone in it. Christ came to die for the sins of the world and everyone in it, so that anyone, whoever, can believe so as to be saved. Those are my presuppositions. If I bring those three presuppositions into this text, it flows perfectly from top to bottom. He debated Steve Gregg and tried to say the same thing to Steve Gregg. You're just jumping all over the place. You're reading verse 45 back into the front of the text. And Steve Gregg, what are you talking about? We just have one point of distinction. You think that you don't know why God gives certain people to the Son, and I'm telling you, we do know why. It's those who believe. What does that change about Greek grammar or the flow of the text? It doesn't change anything. And I didn't start with verse 45. I started with verse 32. The verse that says that the bread of life came to you. He spoke to a crowd of unbelievers saying the bread of life is given to you. Isn't it Calvinism that says you shouldn't say to a crowd of Jesus came for them, because he may not have come for all of them? You can't tell a crowd that Jesus died for you, because some of you may not be elect, and that would be disingenuous. Yet Jesus doesn't have a problem saying the bread of life is given to you, a crowd of grumbling Israelites. And if you eat, you dead sinners, if you eat this bread, you will live. And Calvinism reverses the order. No.
I'm probably gonna stop that there. We'll move over to the cross-examination time, one of them at least. And I thought Leighton did 10 times better than he did in his previous debate. Now, I agreed with everything in his Romans 9 debate. From what I remember, it's been a while since I heard it, but listening to it, I I affirmed, yes, I'm holding to what everything he's doing. But one of the things that I know I think has learned since this point is that he's arguing with James White's contentions. He's doing a much better job of debating, if you will, this time than previous. Let me go to. I may not play all of it because there's something else I want to share. Let me go. Okay, this other video I want to show you guys, but I've got a different thing I want to show you first. Jordan from Great Light Studios posted this clip on X, and this he said this was the highlight for him of the debate, and I think I agree. So let me rewind this. And
So if it was all of Israel, why didn't all of Israel come to Jesus? You're ignoring the fact that you have the ability to listen and believe. Everybody in this room just heard me teach. Is everybody in this room going to believe what I taught? No. Some of them are going to reject what I taught. You're responsible for what you do with what you hear. But just because they hear doesn't mean they'll listen and learn and believe. But it specifically states everyone hearing from the Father will come to me. How is that not clearly? Everyone who has listened and learned, they heard and they learned, which implies that they believed. But it says, everyone hearing from the Father comes to me. How can this be a general reference to God teaching Israel? Everyone who hears from the Father and learns. They all hear his message, but they all don't listen. Some of them close their ears, their eyes, like Acts 28 says. Paul rebuking this same crowd of Israelites, saying, you have closed your eyes. What's he saying? You have closed your eyes. It's their fault for closing their eyes, not a default condition from birth like you teach. So if it was all of Israel, why didn't all?
that's a powerful statement. I think spot on right there. And that's, yeah, I mean, James, you see it now. Like you've listened and learned. James is reading total depravity into the text. He's starting with the foundation that total depravity is true, and that's not what the text communicates. If you've listened and learned, and he goes into the Greek, the Pontus and Pos, like you're making a distinction in the cross-examination of that. If you listen to the full debate, and I don't know if I'll be able to find that specific clip, but Pontus and Pos, he's making a distinction. And this is where Joel, I think, that was on Leighton's channel and was on a different channel called What Your Pastor Didn't Say. I think that's the channel's name. Made a reference that it's two participles, and the way that John 6:44 is read by Dr. White is that if you've listened and learned, it's a how did he put it? Um, it's false faith. And something I saw online also, I didn't realize how many different interpretations there were to John 6:44. Someone says that I saw, and I don't have it pulled up already, but Jesus says he's speaking to them. This is a parable that he's speaking to them. And in John 6:64, which let's go there. We'll pull it up in real time. John 6:16. So now therefore many of his disciples, when they heard this, said, this is a hard saying, talking about Jesus eating his flesh and eating his blood. Who can understand it? When Jesus knew in himself that his disciples complained about this, he said to them, does this offend you? What then if you should see the Son of Man ascend where he was before? Spirit who gives life, the flesh profits nothing. The words that I speak to you are a spirit, and they are life. but there are some of you who do not believe. For Jesus knew from the beginning who they were that did not believe and who would betray him. And he said, therefore, I have said to you that no one can come to me unless it is granted to him by the Father. So obviously, does Jesus know who's going to come to him? Yes, the text just told us that. But someone pointed out that in John 6:37 through 44, Jesus is speaking in a parable, and here he's now explaining to his disciples, he's talking like this. And the purpose of the parable is so that people can hear, but they don't actually perceive. And why would Jesus do that? Think about that. Why would Jesus do that? It proves the point that they have the ability to perceive, but Jesus knew that if people knew everything, and the Hebrews talks about this as well, that or no, sorry, First Corinthians talks about this, that if they knew what Jesus was coming for, that they would have not crucified him. Like Jesus was there to be the perfect spotless lamb for us and die and sacrifice and the atonement for us. But the Bible tells us that if they knew what he was up to, then they would never have crucified him. That's what the Bible says. And so why is there the purpose of parables? Is so that Jesus can talk in a way that people don't perceive it, which proves the point that they could actually perceive it. If he talked plainly to them, like he talked plainly to his apostles, they would have been able to perceive it. Jesus was hiding that. And I think the position that, it's judicial hardening. That could be true in different points, and the context needs to draw that out. But that's something that I think is of consideration to consider with this. Now, let me play this next video. This is a review, a Bible scholar that's his name is Dr. Al Garza, and he plays a clip from James White's response. And this is obviously a 40-minute video. I am going to speed this up because he talks a little slower, and you can still make out what he says, so we can get through a little bit more. But let me do that here, and we'll play it.
Jesus. We have to consider a lot of things, and I have a list here I want to go through real quick, but this is something Dr. White does not do in any of this video presentation. He relies on a little bit of the Greek and his own interpretation, his own Calvinistic interpretation of the passage. The Greek does not affirm his interpretation. You can have a different interpretation, a different way of reading it, looking at it, and you have to, this is where exegesis comes in. When you look at a text, you look at the historical context. Now, what does that mean? You look at the background, the historical background. You consider the time period. You consider the culture, context, authorship, intended audience, and any relevant historical events leading up to that point. He doesn't do that. He briefly gives a view of what happened prior, but he ignores who Jesus is coming to. He's in Capernaum talking to Jews at the synagogue, and it's understood he probably read the scriptures there. And then, of course, we go over verse 44, 45, and so forth. So, but Dr. White will give a couple things in his whole entire explanation that has nothing to do with his interpretation. In fact, throughout the presentation, I agree with almost everything he says with the Greek. When I read the Greek, I read it, and you'll hear me read it as more of a modern Greek and modern Hebrew. When I look at the Hebrew, I kind of Hebrew pronunciation, modern Greek. I might jump around with Erasmus's pronunciation depending on the words, but I'm reading it. He goes to verse 35, and I'll look at this real quick here before we jump in. Where Jesus says, "I am the bread of life. He that comes to me will never hunger, and he that believeth in me shall never thirst." And of course, Dr. White focuses on the ha artimos, the one coming, and of course, ha pistheon, the one believing. That's what he focuses on. No one denies that. It's the ones who are coming and believing. They will never be hungry. They will never be thirsty. Again, but what he does here is he inserts himself and all the elect into these passages with the coming or the giving and the drawing and the coming and all these things. He inserts himself and the elect into all of the passages. And that is not how you do biblical exegesis. That's not how you interpret the verses or the text. And that's what he does the whole time. All the way when he gets down to 644. He even talks about, the rolling of the scrolls and all these things that he doesn't understand how they used to do that. But where they used to just take it out and open it up to where they left off from the last.
I think this is really, really good just to see someone else. And this is very important for us to do as well. I think naturally we're going to have a particular bent towards one, Reformed theology or not, Calvinism or not, and maybe there's and we wouldn't all agree. Those that have Calvinistic views don't all agree. Those that have non-Calvinistic views don't all agree. But this is what's so good about the age in which we live in, is that we have people that are studied in these particular of Greek and grammar and linguistics and Bible scholarship and biblical exegesis and all of these different things that we can learn from what they say and take it in and then go to the text ourselves and try to see, okay, does this match up? And the great thing is that we have, like, if we were living maybe 100 years ago and someone really did know Greek and all of this stuff, they could bring about their own interpretations onto the text, because the point that's made here in this video and other videos that I've been starting to see this popping up everywhere is that no one's denying the words that are there. It's the interpretation that's put onto the text. And what is that? Like, what is the interpretation? And obviously, White is not building his whole foundation of Calvinism off of John 6:44. There's obviously a whole host of other verses that he is affirming are true from his position that he's coming to and bringing onto this text. And we can do that too. And my point is that what we need to do is not take any presuppositions and put it onto the text. We need to really dial in to the best that we can. And we can have scholarships and people of higher education that can help us see what things are, and not just take one person's position. Because I will say this, knowing not as much Greek as James White does, if I would hear him present this, I can very, very well see, like, man, that sounds correct. Sounds correct. I can absolutely, like, he makes good points until you hear someone like Dr. Al Garza and he say, these are not good points. Because what he does is he's using the Greek to just explain his interpretation of the text. And then he dives deeper and how to uh, properly exegete the text and bring in historical context, which greatly matters to understand the text. I think historical context is just massively big that way. So let me continue.
He thinks that they roll them from beginning to end and they have these Popeye arms from doing all that. No, anybody's gone to a synagogue, and I've been through services on the Sabbath of synagogues. When they pull out the scroll, they set it down and they just open up where they last left off. That's why you see some size bigger than others. But again, the Greek does not give him the interpretation he's hoping for. He's going to insert the interpretation. We're going to see at verse 44 here, and I want him to explain this so you can see. So I want you to look at how he interprets verse 44 and 45 into the rest of the verses prior. And again, we're going to focus on some of the things he says. I'll stop and play here and there. We'll look at the Hebrew, and then we'll kind of go from there. So let's start off here.
So we have the grumbling of the Jews. We get by their gungus mooing, and we get down to the key text. And if there's anything that I'm thankful for from all of this stuff, is we have a much stronger, I think we've all been forced to think this through more completely, because synergists who do the Norman Geisler type thing, that standard sort of Arminian, they're not presenting as strong a case, or at least as interesting a case. The provisionists are trying to turn the entire text upside down. They're going to verse 45, and they are giving you an acontextual interpretation that then allows them to read back all the way up to verse 37, a free will autonomy understanding of what comes afterwards. And it changes the entire meaning of the text. So no one can come to me unless something takes place, verse 44, unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him. These are the same hymns. I know we've gone through all this before, but more and more people are listening. So the These are the same hymns, and I will raise him up on the last day. Did we just not hear raise him up? Yes. That's receiving eternal life. And so all who are drawn Father are raised up to eternal life by the Son. That's why if this text just stood on its own, there's no way to be a provisionist synergist.
So let's talk about that again. If the text stands on its own based on his interpretation, how he understands it, then yes, then synergist, doesn't exist. Again, this is based on interpretation. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him. And I'll raise up on the last day. Yes, this is eschatological, where it's the last day, the resurrection. And again,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut him off. I want to say this really quick, is that I hate the expression synergist versus monergist, because I think it's a false dichotomy. I've mentioned this in my Calvinism series, that the synergist versus monergist is a false dichotomy. Everyone believes that God does 100% of the saving. Unless, I'm sure there's a very small sect of people that believe that they are saving themselves, or they're in part cooperating with God. Maybe Catholics are doing that. I don't know. So, but for anyone that holds to, I think what the Bible teaches is that God does 100% of the saving. And because we see the grace, free offer of grace by Jesus through our response to accept that or reject it, if we accept it, that's not working. That's not us cooperating with God, if you will. Like, God still does 100% of the saving. Like, I don't see how that's not true. If you want to call that a synergist, then sure, go ahead. Monergism is not even a real word for that matter. So but I get the point. We're not taking any glory away from God, because that's how he has designed and ordained it to be, that we can respond to his offer, his free grace offer through the God on the Lord Jesus Christ. And if you want to call that synergism, go ahead. But the way that they play that out is it's either God doing all of the saving, or it's you cooperating with God, or you are also partially saving yourself. God's got a lot of it, but you got to add a little to it. So it's, they try to make it a work. Faith is not a work. So I hate that caricature of anyone that's non-Calvinistic to then just say that you are doing something in your own strength, and it's a work, and you have to save yourself. You have to and what makes you better, that you realize that you are better than someone else? No, I hate all of that argumentation. I just don't think it's true. But again, that starts with the presupposition that God has to effectually cause someone to believe. And so let's press on.
context is those drawn, or again, I'm going to the Hebrew, Aramaic, the Greek. Remember, when we deal with exegesis, we deal with historical context, we deal with literary context, we deal with language and translation. Now, literary context is analyzing text in a larger work, with the motifs, narrative structures, the stylist elements of the text, all those things. Language and translation. If the text has been translated from its original language, we study the nuances of the original language and how it affects interpretation. In this case, Jesus is speaking Hebrew, not Greek. He's reading from the Hebrew scriptures, not Greek, not the Septuagint. That's now universally agreed, pretty much, unless you're Dr. White or you're someone who looks at outdated scholarship work. In genre, we look at genre analysis, narrative. If it's a this is a narrative, or there's poetry, prophecy, and all that. We do a textual analysis. Pay attention to keywords and phrases and rhetorical devices used by John. Contextual analysis we use interpretation, which we base on historical literary and textual context, consider different possible meanings and interpretations, which Dr. White does not do. He will stand confused in this video and say, I don't understand how God can do this, and he uses that as a ploy to confuse people. He argues in this passages how like a non-Trinitarian would, by pretending to be confused. How can 3 be 1? How can 1 be 3? I don't understand, even though it's fully understandable. fully comprehend that in Scripture. Dr. White will say, and he said this in his other debates, how could you come to the Father but not the Son? If you can freely come to the Father, then how do you not freely come to the Son? And he plays this dumb part of pretending to be dumb about it. Then we got to compare commentaries, other scholarly commentaries and interpretations to gain better insights, which he does not do. Again, he doesn't do any of the things except his interpretation based on obscure passages in the Greek that nobody disagrees with. Nobody challenges these things from the Greek. And yet he sits there and he'll do this the whole video and he'll play kind of the dumb card and say, I don't understand how they can look at it this way. And then he'll give, well, this is how they might answer, but this doesn't make sense. I mean, he plays this role very well to bring confusion. Now, again, the drawing up, no one can come to me. This is a Jewish context, again, to the Jews, the synagogue, historical audience, all those things are considered. And again, they're looking at how Jesus dealt with them in Jerusalem in John chapter 5, John 6, said in fact in John 7. He even tells them in John 7 that did not Moses give you the Torah, verse 19, and yet none of you carries out the Torah. You don't follow the Torah. You search the scriptures, you think in them have life. Moses will be your accuser because he spoke of me, and if you believe Moses, you believe me in John 5. So again, these are some of the things that Dr. White doesn't consider. And in the linguistic, the Aramaic, the Hebrew, this is very lazy and poor exegesis, and we're going to see how he continues to manipulate the text. So let's listen in.
Because it's not the case that the Father draws everyone. And everyone who is drawn is raised up to eternal life. And if this is dependent upon the Father's action, that's the sovereignty of God in election and salvation. So what can they do? Well, they go to verse 45. It is written in the prophets, they shall all be taught by God. Everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me. And what's, I think, neat now is we have been forced to respond to a new kind of argumentation here that I think helps us to understand the text even more consistently and deeply. So it is written in the prophets.
All right, let me stop there. It is not a new interpretation. It is not a new way of looking at the text. This has been going on. F.F. Bruce has a commentary on this. Other scholarly work has done on this. This is not new. Okay. So again, we look at the word draw. No, Father sent me. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him. The drawing. Look at BDAG. Look at other commentaries. It means to lead in an effectual way, loving way. In fact, it's used in Jeremiah 31, which is partly cited here as the same word that God draws in a loving way the children of Israel, the sons of Israel. See, and so the draw never means regeneration. I haven't found one lexicon that equates that, or born again, or born from above, or any kind of transition into salvation. None of those things. That's an interpretation. That's how Dr. White sees when he sees draws him.
I think that's a huge, huge point that Dr. Algarza just made. Draw ever means being born again. It never means regeneration. It never means that. Like, it actually means to lead. And he'll in the video, he goes on and goes into the Hebrew root that's translated in Greek for John 6:44 and other places. But the word that the Hebrew that is used, and also in the Septuagint, that the Greek version, the word means to lead. And anyone that the Father leads to the Son will come to Christ. And if they have learned and heard, if they've heard and learned from the Father, and those are in there, and that's active, then they will know that Jesus has come from the Father. And let me pull up here in John chapter 4. This is a huge point that I see, and I think I brought this out. If I brought this out in my debate or not, but 4:23. I might go back to 4:21. All right, let me share. Need to learn how to get faster at clicking around. Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews." So, okay, key theme, John's gospel is the fact that in redemptive history, Jesus came to the Jew first, okay? Came to the Jew first and Salvation is of the Jews. Okay. These are the people that Jesus came to. I've come to my own, as John's gospel opens up, and his own, the Jews, did not receive him. Okay. Huge focus here where Calvinism, anyone that subscribes to John 6:44 is talking about an effectual drawing that is applied to only those who are elected by God. It rips the context of which when John is writing. This is not a general statement of how God is working for all eternity now, that it's for an elect group of people, that be Jew and Gentile. The context of John is Jesus has come for the Jews, and through the Jews comes salvation through the proclamation of the gospel. And in this, in my debate, that there is this dividing line in John, in Romans, and Ephesians, that they're all a little bit different in what I'm trying to bring out there. But John's gospel focuses on that the Jews are the ones, the apostles are the ones who are given. We see that in John 17, the gospel to now go out and proclaim it to the world. And now this transitionary period where Jesus is talking to Nicodemus, he's saying that just as Moses was lifted up in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, so that everyone who believes in the Son will have eternal life. There's a shift in redemptive history. And so James White makes this argument in cross-examination to Leighton, like, so there's a difference here. There's a difference here. And I don't think Leighton really answered that directly by saying, yes, there is, but yes, there is. And so look at verse 23. But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship him. Why is the Father seeking people that are going to truly worship God? Can he just make them worship him? I mean, in Calvinism, that's what they say. God effectually gives them the ability through regeneration, through life, so they now are able to believe, and then they become true worshipers. But that's not what the text says. Sorry if you can hear that in the background. My softener just kicked on. My little studio here is in the basement. But true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, and the Father is seeking those who truly worship him in spirit and in truth. And those that are true worshipers will be given to the Son. That's what John's gospel focuses on. And in redemptive history, that's what we see. Okay. Let me look at your guys' comments and see if we have any more. All right. Looks like everyone's in a debate with Manny. Thanks for being a squirrel, Manny, and taking people down a rabbit hole. All right. Let's move back over. We don't have a ton of time left. Let's move back over to cross-examination.
Okay. Start to draw. Speaking of drawing, start to draw. Okay.
By God.
Whom they've not been taught about. Just like I said, they have to be drawn by the teaching of God.
So it's a matter of communicating facts or data to someone. Is that what the...
If you want to call the gospel facts and data,
Okay.
I mean, the gospel is the power of God into salvation. It's the light. It's the sword of the Spirit. It pierces in through not only bone and marrow, but into the heart, and it affects our lives. Just like, you may say, the sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words have...
Okay, so a person who is drawn, again, looking at verse 44, a person who is drawn by the Father, by the Father to the Son is being taught by God. Is being taught the gospel by God the Father.
Well, Hebrews 1 says, in days of past, God spoke through the prophets and other various means, but in these days, he speaks through his son, and then of course the apostles and the bride. So in that day, in John 6, it's the transitionary period of being taught through the prophets and the law, and now it's transitioning through being taught through Jesus and the bride of Christ through the gospel that's being sent to all of creation.
So everyone who is drawn by the Father to the Son, is that today? Is that all people, or is there what differentiates as to who is being drawn by the Father?
Well, we live in the church age, so that the drawing is by Jesus to himself. Jesus draws all people once he's raised up, and he's been raised up. And so he sends the gospel to go into all creation, and through the bride and through the gospel of Jesus Christ, through the teaching of the apostles, we are now being drawn through the teaching of Christ.
So the Father is no longer drawing people to the Son?
There may be people who read the law and the prophets prior. It's people in the Jewish tradition may come to Christ through the teachings of God the Father. But it's, as you know, it's a triune God. So God may draw through various means. In the Old Testament, it was, as Hebrews 1 says, it was the Father that drew through the prophets.
So actually, verse 44 isn't continuing true today. Something has changed to where when Jesus says, I will raise him up on the last day, who is it that Jesus will raise up on the last day?
Everyone who comes to him in faith.
Everyone who comes to him in faith. And yet in verse 44, who is it that Jesus will raise up on the last day?
Well, in verse 44, like you acknowledge, the difference between the context of chapter 12 and chapter 4 is chapter 4 is still prior to the crucifixion.
I think you mean chapter 6.
I'm sorry, yes, chapter 6, 44. And so in chapter 6, he's drawing, believe in the Father, who have listened and learned from the Father, he's drawing them to the Son, and they will be raised up in the last day. For example.
So again, draw, meaning lead. The Father, those that were true worshipers of the Father, the Father's leading them now to the Son. That's where the root word comes from. That's utilized in the Old Testament, the same word that's in Hebrew, and now we see in Greek, that's the same root word. And so something that Leighton points out, that unfortunately he couldn't find the reference where in James White's book that he brought this out, but he later did a video after the fact that explained this. And he said that James White holds to that draw means regeneration. And James White in the debate says, no, that's not what it means. But in James White's book, the Father draws, or the drawing of the Father, he explicitly says that regeneration is equated to drawing from John 6:44. And so whether he forgot what he wrote in his book or he was trying to, I don't know what he was trying to do there. The benefit of the doubt that he maybe changed his position or he forgot what he wrote in his book, but he did affirm that draw means regeneration. But here in this debate, he now says, no, that doesn't mean that. So interestingly, that way, I think that's very helpful. And going back to a point I made earlier is the fact that it's okay, Calvinists, to like not have a particular verse work in the systematic of Calvinism. Obviously, there are many Calvinists that are able to do that. And now it's just a matter of, just because one doesn't hold up to like what you thought it did in support of Calvinism, then it's okay, because you have a lot of other texts that you can go to say that it proves that. Okay. Now, I don't agree that that's correct. I don't agree that it does, obviously, because I've worked through all of these things and now I see it a different way. I don't see that these texts support it, but it's okay to affirm that you're wrong. And one of the things that you'll catch if you watch Leighton's video, where he's talking to Joel, who is the guy from Oxford, critique on this, and he says, here's where White is wrong, here's where Leighton is wrong, and Leighton is affirming in the video, yes, I can be wrong. Yes, I can be wrong. And I just think one of the things that's that's interesting just to observe is the fact that you see Leighton saying, yeah, I got that wrong. And I wish I would have known what you shared with me that I learned from you for the purpose of the debate. But then you see the contrast with James. He's not willing to do that. In fact, he cuts Joel off in his video and just all right, well, we're done with that. He doesn't get it, and everything else. And I don't want to label something, but again, you have to examine the fruit of what's going on there. And it does come off very prideful and arrogant on James's part. And the humility of spirit, like I think out here, she says the humility of spirit to be able to admit when you're wrong is huge. It is, right? I probably foresee that I'm going to continue to learn. And I might go back to something that I have said or done in any of my previous videos. And if people call me out on it, I go and relook at it. And if I can say, wow, I think I was wrong there, I'm wholeheartedly happy to say I was wrong. Like, I think that we all as believers should be willing to learn and grow. And if people point out they're valid and it proves to be the correct thing, we should be humble and say, yeah, you know what? I was wrong there. In fact, I actually made a mistake in my first video on Calvinism, saying that the King James didn't have any Calvinist interpreters with it. And that, in fact, was wrong. Many people pointed that out. But do you discredit everything that I say because I got something wrong? No. That's why we examine what's going on. There might be things that I say that are correct. There's things that James White says that's correct. You know, and Al Garza, which we just got done listening to, he will go on and say, James has the Greek right. Like, we're not arguing James has got the Greek text understanding, what the Greek is saying grammatically. Like, he gets that, but that doesn't mean that he's properly exegeting the text. And so there's a difference between the two things, and we need to make sure that we are properly exegeting the text. And so Greek, while it is important, and I think it is one of the things that I think that we know. One of the clips that I'm getting prepared for in this other video that I'm doing, that it'll be a shorter video. It'll already be done, but next week, I'm hopeful that it's next week. I've had to make some modifications with it, but next week I'm going to be putting out kind of not a trailer, if you will, but it's something that I'm going to be embarking on, and it's going to be a series of different videos that I can't say too much yet, but it's going to be really, really exciting. Okay, so and next week, hopefully it'll be ready and you guys will get to see it. And some people have done some responses to my debate, and so I'm playing some clips from that, and it's going to bring out an opportunity for us to examine the text exegetically and more specifically some things from Romans. So I guess I could say a little bit. One of the things that I get a lot on since the debate is, where in the world did this Romans theory come from? And why did you think that was relevant to bring out in the debate? And so I've got a video that's going to explain that, but not in full. It's going to be what people are saying, and to give like little nuggets of what I'm going to embark on and really go into a big, deeper dive in that. So I'm really excited for that, because I really do think that when we look at, like I mentioned in my debate, the dividing line of different books of the Bible and redemptive history, there's a dividing line in John, as I mentioned earlier. There's a dividing line in Romans, and that's what we're going to dive into. And I've already kind of touched on the dividing line in Ephesians in my Ephesians video, but I'm going to be doing a really big, deep dive into Romans and expounding upon this, because there just was not enough time to do that in the debate format. So all that to say, for those that didn't hear the beginning and won't rewind to hear the beginning of this video, I am also working on a Hebrews 7:25 response for James White. My hope is to actually have Dr. Al Garza even join me for that video, or be a part of that video in one way, shape, or form. whether it's live or pre-recorded, I don't know yet. But he's reached out to me, and he did a response video to my debate and he affirmed the Romans understanding, and I know he's on the book of Hebrews, so he wants to engage, and I look forward to that opportunity. So I'm excited for that. But overall, when it comes to James for this debate with Leighton, I think Leighton did a really good job. Now, there's one critique that I know from a debate point, as I learned, like, how do you properly debate people? And obviously not a lot of experience, but just listening to experts that say this is the right way to do things. I've heard that if you get too emotional and too worked up, that you lose points, if you will. And there was a point where Leighton did kind of get, I think, agitated or frustrated. James was poking the bear and Leighton took the bait, and he got kind of, I think, very frustrated, where he's basically saying, this is what I believe. And I could understand his frustration, because James is asking kind of the same question over and over again. And he's just like, he finally gets to the point, clear enough. Like, do you get it now? Do you get what I'm saying now? And so that was just, it was interesting to see him kind of fired up, where you don't normally see him fired up that way. And then it got into infant damnation, and James wanted nothing to do with that in the debate. And in fact, the moderator had to take a timeout and say, are we going to be able to continue this debate? So obviously, I think that there's a lot that we can look at on what is the right way to do this, what is the wrong way to do this. There's a lot we can learn. When I worked in retail, had probably 15 direct managers in different stages and stuff while I was there. And most of them were not good. There were 2 of the 15 managers that I had that were really good managers. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot what wrong looks like, so that when I stepped into that role, I learned, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And so you see what wrong looks like, and that helps you. You can learn from that too. I'm not going to do that. So let's see here. See if we have anything else. I know we're a little over the time I thought. I've got a busy day, a busy weekend, and I'm traveling for my work next week. And so a lot. I'm preaching on Sunday at my church, and if all goes well, if I can get a copy, I'll probably post that to the channel as well, so you guys can hear something different from me, in the sense of, like, not like a live setting and not like a pre-recorded setting. You can hear that if you guys want. And if you think of it, pray for me for the message, and that it would be received well. It would be biblical, and the Spirit would just use it for God's glory. And I might just answer any random questions that pop in. I am sorry I've not engaged much with the comment section, but I know a lot of people are engaging with Manny as well. And I don't know if I'll do debate ever again, but if I do any kind of situation that's like debate, I'd rather it be like a conversation, kind of more what I did with Rogue Calvinist, where it wasn't really a debate. I know it was kind of titled that, but make it more of a conversation. Let's just have a conversation. What's your perspective on this? How do you draw that from the text? And then this is what I see. This is how I draw things from the text. Things like that I think are helpful, because then we can have a dialogue. We can have a communication. So hopeful to do that. I'll go here really quick. T. Grogan says, so I thought people die because of sin. Why do infants die? I don't know if that's a direct question for me, or it looks like it might be something that's being engaged in the conversation. I think the whole topic of infant damnation is just very, very fascinating. And there's a lot of people out there that are saying different things. Question: Can you talk more about your Hebrews video coming out? Sounds interesting. Yes. So, well, in terms of like study and prep, I think the best way to understand any verse in a text is to read the book over and over and over again and try to get as much of the whole picture of the book the best as possible. Then you have to go beyond that and how do these things connect with the overarching narrative of the whole Bible? So it's not so when James made the statement to me in the debate, can you exegete this text? My mind went to no, I can't do that. I gotta go over everything in the book of Hebrews, then find where it's in its proper context, and then I can give you my throwaway answer of what I think it says off the cuff. But he specifically said exegete, and again, I've mentioned this in my post debate thoughts. I don't know if that was a like maybe like a little bait to like get me to do something, have him like explain the Greek and why that his interpretation is true. And so I just felt like it just wasn't I wasn't going to be able to do it properly based off of that question, which may have been what he wanted me to go down. But I didn't want to take that bait and go down and do that. So, but I said, I'm happy to give you a proper explanation. And I know he then claimed victory at that point. Like, well, the debate ended there. Well, okay, in your opinion, maybe it did, but I'm not going to exegete a passage and give a throwaway answer. I want to better properly know full context. And so all of that. So I'm skipping. So I'm, underlining and highlighting words. I'm doing all do so to answer your question, Amber, there's a lot I'm building up and taking notes down of different concepts and themes, and then where the cross references are from the Old Testament, and trying to find out what is the context in the Old Testament, so that I can properly understand how the New Testament is drawing that out. And so that's what I'm working on right now. I don't know how quickly I'll be able to get to getting the video published, because one of the things that's hard for me, like the study part is like one hill to come over, but the other hill is now putting content out there that is visually appealing. And I like the idea of like I'm able to teach, and then you see like the stuff on the side of the screen, like my Calvinism series, and so you're tracking with me. I think that's helpful. So then just designing that from a video production standpoint just takes time. And in my Calvinism series, I was only focused on this one thing, where now I've got like 5 different things that I'm working on top of a 50+ hour job. So, and, preaching at the church, also. So it's just, I've also taken on a Bible study, leading a Bible study at my church. So want to do things well and know that it might take some time to get some of that stuff out there. Scott asks, where do I work? I work at Christian Healthcare Ministries. They're health cost sharing ministry. And my oversight is basically enrollment. So I help with the team that takes the calls. Hey, I'm interested in joining CHM. How does health cost sharing work? And and help support them that way. And then I also oversee the groups department, where I connect with pastors and nonprofit ministries, and even some for-profit entities, to have a group solution for them as well. What's awesome is that for groups, you could talk to your pastor about this too. We don't work on commissions. Okay. So it's just, I get a salary, and, it's non-commissionable, which is great. It's great to be in that type of environment, to like not, retail. There was, when I worked in retail, there was commissions and stuff, but there's not at CHM. So no commissions, but what's awesome is that from a group perspective, when I connect with pastors, and my team connects with pastors from all over the place, if they have a health insurance solution currently, then likely we're able to save them 30 to 50%. And so think about what that does in a grand scale. Some of these churches are spending tons of money in healthcare for their staff, And if they can save 30 to 50% off of that, that's more money now able to be redistributed for gospel advancement, kingdom focused things, more money for mission, more money for maybe church planting, maybe they need to hire a pastor, whatever that looks like, for them, then they're able to do that more freely that way. So we see it as a partnership for the advancement of the gospel. And CHM's model is we're a ministry first. And so we want to bless and serve and love people. And they're the original health cost sharing ministry. They're the largest. And it's the one that my family chose to do prior to me working there. And it was a total God thing, how it worked out. Thank you, TikTok Theologic, for the super chat. Let me find where it is and I can show it here. Oops. We cannot ignore proper rules of biblical interpretation. We can make the Greeks say anything if we ignore the context, culture, author, intent, etc. Amen. That's exactly right. You can read the Greek and totally miss it. You could be an expert in Greek and totally miss it and misapply what it actually says. Context is king. Context is king when it comes to Bible interpretation, but it's more than just context. It's also then the context of the passages in the Bible, but then also context within the historical context. We need to understand, how would the original audience, who are they, first of all, how would they have interpreted this? Because it was a message directly for a particular people at a particular point in time in redemptive history, that we need to know what was the author's intent for them. And then once we understand how they would have got it, then we can now correctly apply it to our lives today. And so, amen to that. Love it. I don't know if I missed anything else. Amber said exactly. So, guys, this is great. Thank you so much for spending the time with me this morning and going over Leighton's and James's debate. I know a lot of people have made the comment that we should Installation 101. Hey, there you go. That's there's a new YouTube channel. Claim it before it goes, before someone else does. Translation 101. Let me see. Loves to hug it out. Okay, I see. I just think free will is such an obvious reality for all who operate with, and it's over all the Bible. Yes, I agree. So thank you again, guys, for spending the time with me this morning and reviewing it. Probably different of a review than past, but a lot of since the review, and that was by God's grace, I guess, if you will. Like, if I would have done a response right after watching the debate, it probably would have been a little bit different than now having more time have gone on and for other people to jump into the conversation and share their thoughts on John chapter 6. And then some of the response that we've seen online. And one thing I sure hope is that what we can do, hopefully, is we can model Christ and his love within the body, because when things like this come up, with debate come up, it gets very contentious, it gets very emotional, and you see character, I think, on both sides of the aisle that are not really operating in biblical love with the purpose of glorifying God. It's a lot of jabbing, it's a lot of gotcha, and it's you're false and everything else that way. Now, if something's false, we need to say it's false, but I think the online thing can turn into a terrible testimony for Christ. And so it's something I'm mindful of. Even some things that are funny and sarcastic that I like, and that's really funny, I'm like, I don't want to engage or promote that, because I don't want someone else to stumble as a result from that. Obviously, now holding the position that yes, everyone can believe, most will reject and suppress the truth and unrighteousness, but everyone can believe what we do, what we say does matter, because although we can't save people, we're to present ourselves with Christ-like love and to spread the message of the gospel in our words, in our actions, in our way that we behave and engage with other people. And God can use those means to draw people in. But I definitely don't think he's going to draw people in if we're engaging in an unloving way and we're bickering back and forth and we're jabbing and all this kind of stuff. So just something to think through before engaging in certain things that way. So my last two thoughts. What? Okay. Thanks. I don't know your name. I just call you Hug It Out. So, but thank you for and thank you guys for watching the video, and I hope to see you next time. Hopefully sometime next week I'll have the pre-recorded video that will go over what I am going to dive into. It's going to probably consume most of the summer's content. It's that big of a thing. I might do some random, hey, there we go. Kristen, now I know your name. Great. I'll get to call you by name. And it's going to consume a lot of the rest of the summer, most likely. But really, really exciting things. I can't wait to share the stuff with you guys. Thank you so much for watching. God bless and take care. And like I always say, go and be a good Berean. Study to show yourself approved, and be faithful in the word, and continue to walk faithful to him. So God bless. Take care. We'll catch you next time.